They say the secret of happiness is to have low expectations, and the newer doesn't always mean better. Both of these are true to some extent with respect to the new Snapdragon 835 chipset. I will tell you why, but before that, come on, let's all of us dive together into the world of technology for a swim. Don't forget friends, remember me, I'm Prajwal from Technology Gym. Hello friends, welcome back. Before we move ahead, as always, I have a question for you. Tell me in the comment section which processor is your current smartphone running. It could be Snapdragon, Kirin, Helix or Exynos, whatever it is, please do type that in the comment section below. Moving on, these days so many people are talking about the new Snapdragon 835 processor and I find that they have a lot of expectations on it. To add to the excitement, some of the high-end devices that are supposed to be released this year like the Samsung Galaxy S8, OnePlus 5 and the Xiaomi Mi Mix 2 and many more are expected to come packed with the latest Snapdragon processor. But the latest benchmark tests performed on Snapdragon 835 processor tell a slightly different story and proves once again newer doesn't always mean better. Remember, Qualcomm faced a similar issue when they released Snapdragon 810. Because of its overwhelming heating issues and slight performance issues, it didn't see commercial success. But relax, Snapdragon 835 isn't that bad. Earlier rumors and expectations suggested that SD835 chipset will give a huge boost in performance, decreases power consumption by 40% when compared to Snapdragon 821, and improves your gaming and 4K video playback to a greater extent. However, the benchmark test delivered the following results. Before I show you and take you through the test results, keep this in mind. All these tests were not performed on a regular device, they were performed on a mobile device platform or MDP device, or in simple words, a reference device. These were like oversized tablets that had a 5.5-inch 2K display and a 6GB RAM. These are the results that were produced in the benchmark test. One notable improvement is, the overall size of Snapdragon 835 chipset is now reduced by 35% as a result of using Samsung's 10nm LPE FinFET process. In the above results, you can see that Snapdragon 835 processor performed mostly better against its predecessor Snapdragon 821. But there are few instances like the single-threaded floating point test and the on-screen GPU rendering test where it performed worse than the earlier generations. This may be due to the design of Snapdragon 835 cores, which these days are based on ARM's Cortex core designs. But the positive thing is, it performed mostly well in many of the performance tests against the earlier two generations, but in few instances, the lead is not as wide as you would expect it to be. However, these are early days and initial benchmarks of a processor running on a test device. Real-world performance could be radically different depending upon the manufacturer of the phone using the processor. And definitely in few areas, SD835 processor is already way better than its earlier generations. Let's hope that when it comes packed with our favorite devices, it delivers such a punch in performance that we would all love to see. Your support is like a jewel in the crown. I have no words to describe. I'm Prajwal from Technology Gym. Please like, comment and subscribe. Please do share my video and keep those likes, comments and subscriptions coming and support my channel. With that, hit thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe if you loved it. Hope to see you all again. Until then, goodbye and thank you for watching.